There's something about the wilderness at night that feels wrong. It's not just the darkness, it's the silence that follows, the kind that hums in your ears until you start to hear things that might not even be there. It was early September when Ethan, Marcus, and Logan decided to take one last camping trip before college started. They'd all grown up together in Vermont, small town, endless woods, and a lake they used to swim in as kids called Mirror Lake. The lake wasn't famous or anything, but locals said it was bottomless. Every few years, someone would go missing around there, a hiker, a fisherman, and the sheriff would say it was just accidents. But kids whispered that the lake took people who stared into it too long. That didn't stop the boys from heading there. They packed 2 tents, a cooler full of beer, and a Bluetooth speaker. Ethan's truck groaned up the gravel trail until they reached the small dirt clearing. The air smelled like pine, wet soil, and fake rot, like something dead had been buried somewhere nearby. They set up camp by the water's edge. The lake was so still it reflected the trees perfectly. No ripples, no bugs. Just black glass stretching into the dark. Marcus threw a beer to Logan. "Dude, remember when we came here in high school and scared the crap out of Ben?" "Yeah," Logan laughed. "We told him the lake whispers your name at midnight." Ethan chuckled, staring at the water. "Funny thing is, I actually heard it once." The others froze for a second. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. Ethan shrugged. "It was like my name, but whispered from under the water. I thought it was you guys messing with me." They laughed it off. Boys being boys, teasing each other, roasting marshmallows, talking about girls and college. At around midnight, the fire started dying down. The forest grew colder, quieter, unnaturally quiet. Even the crickets stopped. Then Logan said, "Do you guys hear that?" They all turned toward the lake. There was a faint sound, like soft splashing. But the surface was perfectly still. "Probably a fish," Marcus muttered. Ethan's flashlight scanned across the water. Nothing. Then something whispered. It wasn't clear, more like breath over water, but all 3 of them froze. A word, maybe 2. Like a name being said from somewhere deep. E. Then the flashlight shook in Ethan's hand. What the hell was that? He whispered. No one answered. The sound stopped, and silence pressed back against them like the whole forest was holding its breath. Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing faint movement, wet footsteps maybe, circling around his tent. He thought it was Marcus going to take a piss, but when he whispered his name, there was no reply. He peeked through the tent zipper. The campfire was embers now. The moon hung above the lake, pale and swollen. And on the other side of the water, a figure was standing, tall, thin, completely still. At first, Ethan thought it was Logan, but the figure's clothes were off. The outline was human, but the head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was listening for something. Ethan blinked. The figure raised one arm, slow, stiff, and pointed directly at him. Ethan stumbled backward inside the tent, heart hammering. When he looked again, it was gone. He didn't sleep that night. Logan and Marcus said they'd heard splashes too, but neither had left the tent. They tried to laugh it off again, told Ethan he was half dreaming, but Ethan couldn't shake the image of that thing across the lake. They decided to go for a short hike. The forest around Mirror Lake was thick, ferns and roots twisting around old trees like veins. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Marcus was ahead when he suddenly stopped. "Guys, look at this." In the mud was a single barefoot footprint. Too big to be any of theirs. Too long. The toes were stretched unnaturally apart, and the print looked fresh, maybe made that morning. They followed the trail for a few minutes before it simply ended, right at the lake's edge. Later that afternoon, they borrowed an old rowboat tied near a tree. They rowed toward the center, where the lake looked almost black. Halfway across, Logan said he saw something below the surface, the shadow of a structure. "Dude, look. It's like a roof down there." They leaned over. Through the murky water, a dark outline appeared, the top of an old cabin submerged beneath the lake. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his arms. There's no way anyone built that there. Marcus said, "What if it sank? Like, maybe it used to be a house before they flooded the valley." The boat creaked. Water lapped gently against the sides. Then Logan's hand shot up. "Wait, did you feel that?" The boat rocked slightly. Something had brushed against the bottom. Marcus peered over the edge and screamed. A hand had pressed up against the surface from below, pale, waterlogged, fingers splayed wide. It slid across the hull, then vanished beneath the black. They rowed back as fast as they could. That night, they didn't drink. They barely spoke. Only the fire crackled. Then, out of the woods, a faint wet sound came again. Footsteps, dragging. Marcus grabbed a flashlight, shining toward the trees. Who's there? Nothing. Then, from behind them, near the lake, a soft splash. Logan turned his light and froze. A figure stood half submerged in the water. Its head hung sideways, its mouth open, gaping, dripping black water. It whispered something. Ethan couldn't breathe. It was his voice. "Come back down." The flashlight flickered. When it steadied again, the figure was gone. Only ripples remained, spreading slowly across the silent lake. They didn't wait. They packed their gear and left. No one spoke during the drive. 2 weeks later, Ethan got a call from Marcus's mom. Marcus hadn't come home from his new campus. They said his car was found abandoned by a small lake near Massachusetts. Ethan didn't ask which one. He already knew. The lake had swallowed more than just light that night. Ethan couldn't shake the image of that gaping mouth, pale fingers, and the way it whispered his own name. He tried to convince himself it was stress, lack of sleep, the imagination of a scared 18-year-old. But deep down, he knew something had changed. 2 weeks later, Ethan was restless. He couldn't stop thinking about Mirror Lake, about Marcus, and that submerged cabin. He returned alone, hiking through the thick forest with only a backpack, flashlight, and a small camping stove. The locals barely noticed him. A few warned him off. "Mirror Lake doesn't like visitors after dark," one old man said. "People go in, don't come out the same." Ethan nodded politely and walked past, ignoring the shivers crawling up his spine. Reaching the clearing near the water, he saw the lake as black and still as before. No ripples. No life, just quiet. He rented a small rowboat from an abandoned dock. The wood creaked under his weight, the same eerie sound as the first night with Marcus and Logan. Rowing toward the center, Ethan peered down at the lake. The cabin's outline was faint, submerged beneath the murky water. Its roof was barely visible, warped wood, moss, and algae clinging to the structure. He tied the boat and donned a waterproof headlamp. With a sense of dread, he dove in. The water was freezing. Darkness swallowed him instantly. His headlamp cut a narrow circle of visibility. Then he felt it. A hand, ice cold, dragging along his leg. He kicked violently, surfaced gasping, and splashed water everywhere. The rowboat rocked dangerously, but it held. Ethan's heart pounded. Whatever was down there, it wasn't dead. The next day, he returned with scuba gear. He couldn't explain why, but something compelled him, a mix of guilt, curiosity, and obsession. He anchored the boat over the cabin and slowly descended. The cabin was intact, almost perfectly preserved underwater. Furniture floated, warped and coated in silt. On a desk, a journal lay open. The water had mostly preserved the pages. Ethan grabbed it and flipped through. The entries were from someone named Harold Stevens, dated over 50 years ago. "The lake watches, it remembers. It wants company. I hear whispers at night, my own name, calling me into the water. I can't resist. They said the cabin is cursed, but I didn't believe. Now, I know." Ethan shivered. The last page was written in hurried, "Do not come. It will follow. It remembers your face." That night, Ethan camped nearby, away from the lake's edge. But sleep didn't come. At midnight, the whispers returned. First faint, then louder. "Ethan?" The sound seemed to drift from every direction. Trees, water, darkness. Ethan shone his flashlight toward the lake. The water rippled. Slowly, something surfaced, the cabin's outline emerging from the black water, wood rotting but animated. A figure stood in the doorway, pale, long fingers. Head tilted unnaturally, eyes hollow. It waved at him. "Come down," it said, voice gurgling like water running through a pipe. Ethan froze. His hands shook. His body refused to move. Then the water around the boat began to churn. Something massive beneath the surface stirred. Ethan's boat was pulled toward the cabin. He tried to row, but it felt as if chains were attached to the hull. Every stroke was futile. He could see shapes beneath the water, dozens of pale hands, faces, twisted in silent screams. They reached up, fingers grazing the boat's sides. The cabin door creaked open wider. Inside, he saw shadows moving, whispering, reaching. Ethan remembered Harold's journal. "It remembers your face." Panic surged. He threw the anchor overboard. It caught a tree, yanking him sideways. Water splashed into the boat. Suddenly, silence. The shadows receded. The cabin sank slightly. The whispers stopped. Ethan gasped, soaked and shivering. His heart thundered. Somehow, he was still alive. By dawn, Ethan dragged the boat to shore. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't check his phone. The forest was quiet, the lake unnervingly calm. He swore he'd leave, forever. But even as he packed, he noticed something in the sand. A footprint, barefoot, pale, elongated. Just like the ones Marcus had seen. And a single word etched into the mud: soon. Ethan left Mirror Lake that day, but the nightmares followed. The whispers invaded his dreams. Faces appeared in dark corners of rooms. He couldn't escape the feeling that the lake, and whatever lived in the cabin beneath it, knew he was alive. The lake wasn't done with Ethan. He could feel it even miles away. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the pale fingers, the hollow eyes, the cabin lurking just beneath the black water. Sleep became impossible. Every shadow in his apartment seemed alive, every creak of the floorboards a whisper calling his name. Ethan knew one thing: he had to return to the woods. He didn't want to, but the pull was irresistible. 2 months after his last visit, Ethan found himself driving back to Mirror Lake. He told no one. Not his family, not his friends. The forest welcomed him with the same chilling silence. The trees stretched tall, casting long shadows even in the afternoon sun. As he reached the trail leading to the lake, he noticed something new. A line of footprints, barefoot, elongated, the same as before, leading away from the lake into the dense woods. Ethan's heart pounded. He followed them, each step heavier than the last. The footprints didn't seem random. They guided him deeper into the forest. Night fell quickly. Ethan set up a small campsite near the trail. The sounds of the forest felt off. No owls, no crickets, only silence interrupted by occasional whispers. He heard footsteps again, slow, deliberate. He froze. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, thin, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Its head tilted unnaturally, like the being from the lake. "Ethan?" The voice was unmistakable. It wasn't human. Ethan ran. He didn't look back, but the figure followed. Silence no longer existed, only the sound of his own panicked breathing and the soft footsteps behind him. Hours passed. He ran through the woods, branches clawing at his face, roots threatening to trip him. He reached a clearing and froze. The trees around him were forming shapes. Faces, twisted and pale, pressed against the bark. Whispers echoed from every direction. "You came back." "It's time." Panic surged. Ethan tried to climb a hill to get above the forest, but the ground felt wrong. Mud sucked at his boots, roots caught his feet. The shadows closed in. Ethan stumbled into an old, abandoned ranger cabin. It looked ordinary in daylight, but at night, the walls seemed to move. The shadows inside weren't just shapes. They were alive. A hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing his shoulder. Ethan screamed, spinning around. The figure from the lake stood before him. Its eyes were hollow, but they burned with recognition. "You can't escape." Ethan swung a branch, but it passed through the figure like smoke. The whispers grew louder, chanting his name over and over. "Soon, soon." Ethan tried to hide inside the cabin, but the shadows crept along the walls. They whispered secrets he couldn't understand, stories of people who came before him. Faces appeared in the darkness, twisted in terror, mouths moving silently. Sleep wasn't an option. The forest haunted him even when he closed his eyes. Every corner of the cabin seemed to shift. Every doorway led to another hallway he hadn't noticed before. He realized something horrifying. The forest itself had become alive. It wasn't just a lake anymore. Dawn came, but it brought no relief. Ethan stumbled out of the cabin. The footprints around the clearing had multiplied. He was surrounded. He ran blindly, desperate to reach the lake. When he arrived, it was calm again, deceptively peaceful. But he knew better. The water shimmered unnaturally, like the shadows beneath were moving, waiting. Ethan had survived the night, but the forest, the lake, the cabin, they weren't finished with him. The whispers never stopped. Ethan had returned to his apartment, back in the city, but the lake followed him. Every shadow on the wall, every drip of water from the faucet, every echo in the hallway carried a voice calling his name. He tried to convince himself it was his mind, exhaustion, paranoia, but he knew better. The forest, the lake, the cabin, they had claimed a part of him. He couldn't ignore it any longer. It was a moonless night when Ethan drove back to the lake for the third and final time. His truck's headlights barely penetrated the dense forest. Every mile closer made his stomach knot tighter. When he arrived at the clearing, the air was thick with fog. The lake was blacker than ever, reflecting nothing. The rowboat floated at the shore, waiting. Ethan didn't hesitate. He climbed in, took the oars, and rowed toward the center. His heartbeat echoed in his ears louder than the sound of the water. As he neared the spot where the cabin lay beneath the water, Ethan saw it, the outline of the roof breaking the surface, warped and ancient, like it had been waiting for him. He dove, scuba gear ready, descending into the water. The lake was freezing, sucking at his skin, but he swam faster than ever. The cabin was intact underwater, walls thick with moss and silt. The door creaked open slowly. From the darkness inside, a figure emerged, taller than a man, thinner than a shadow. Its head tilted unnaturally, fingers long, dragging through the water. It whispered, "You came back. Now you belong to us." Ethan tried to retreat, but the shadows in the water surged. Faces pressed against the glassy surface, screaming silently, pulling him closer. He remembered Harold's journal from Part 2. It remembers your face. He realized the entity didn't just want him dead. It wanted him to join the others. The shadow reached for him, and Ethan fought with every ounce of strength. His hands gripped a submerged beam, pulling himself toward the cabin's doorway. Inside, the walls shifted. Dark shapes moved, echoing the whispers of those who had disappeared before. They were alive, trapped in the cabin, waiting. The entity grabbed his ankle. Ethan fell, tumbling into a lower floor submerged in black water. He felt hands all around him, dragging him down, whispers in every language he didn't recognize. Come down, forever. He kicked, punched, and swam desperately. His lungs burned, but he refused to surrender. He remembered Marcus, Logan, the journal, every warning. Summoning all his strength, he broke through a waterlogged window, gasping for air. The lake roared around him. The shadows rose and sank, frozen in rage as he swam to the surface. Ethan clambered back into the rowboat. He didn't look back. The forest and lake seemed normal again in the first rays of sunlight, but he knew the truth. The whispers had faded, but they were still there, in dreams, in corners of rooms, in reflections of water. Ethan drove away, leaving Mirror Lake behind. But deep down, he knew the cabin beneath the water waited. And one day, it would call again. He would never forget the pale hands, the hollow eyes, or the voice whispering his name from the black water.